Okay, good morning, everyone. We have 4 amazing authors with us today, all through our friends at Scholastic. And we also have our wonderful friend and moderator, Susan Reckers, who is the children's specialist at Rakestraw Books in Danville. Let's hear it for Rakestraw. And so I want to go ahead and let Susan get started because I know she's been waiting to talk to these 4 wonderful folks. So go ahead, Susan, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Scholastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. I am so excited to hear from these 4 amazing authors this morning and introduce you to their new books. So let's get started. I will introduce them one at a time, and they'll give a little bit of blurb about their book, and then we'll have some general questions for all of them. So to get started, I am starting with Amy Kim Kibuishi. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. Amy is the author and illustrator of this fabulous start of a graphic novel series for middle grade. I love the series. I can't wait for the second one to come out. So excited to hear more about it. It's called the Rima Chronicles, and the first one is The Realm of the Blue Mist. Amy? So what I would love to do for all of you is give a little blurb about the book and maybe talk about, I know it sounds basic, but the inspiration behind it, meaning why this book now?
Of course. So as Susan said, this is the first book in a series of graphic novels. It'll probably be around 5 books, but you never know. But it basically follows the story of this young woman, Tabby Simon, and her quest for answers surrounding her father's death. And so it takes her through this portal to another world called Rima. And Rima is a world with its own, let me see, I tried to pick some pages out, its own mythology and history. And it is a big, beautiful world with its own culture. And as the boy she followed through the portal tries to get her home, she kind of gets pulled into a really big adventure. And that's sort of the first book in this series. And this is a book I've been working on since I was like 12 approximately. When I was 12, I was going through a really rough time and I had a dream. And when I woke up, I just really wanted to get back to that place. I had the characters, the world, and everything. And as I grew up, every time I saw something that inspired me, like Sailor Moon, or certain games that I would play, like Secret of Mana, or books I'd read, like The Golden Compass, it would all inform the development of the world. And of course, every time I went through something big in my life, like going to Korea and visiting my mom's hometown, I would go into the development of the story as well. And I'm just so happy it's finally ready to share with everybody. This is like my favorite story to work on. It is probably the only story I work on, I'm guessing, because I don't have any other ideas really. It's just this one book that I really care about a lot. And yeah, I'm just excited. I hope you guys like it if you pick it up.
Well, a couple quick questions for you,
Sure.
Amy. How do you pronounce the name of the tree?
Oh, Yggdrasil. I had to look that up. It's a Norse mythology reference to the Tree of Life between Midgard and Asgard, I believe. But
wonderful. And are you Tabby?
I'm everybody in the book, including the world. It's like weird because this story's been with me for so long. It's been a web comic. I wrote it as a prose novel for about 7 years. I didn't draw anything.
Oh.
I really want to get this book right. I care about it so much because it did so much for me during a hard time. And over the years, as I shared it with people, young people would come up and say that it helped them too. I think there's just something very healing about a really good fantasy story that doesn't shy away from hard truths. And that's what I'm trying to go for with the Rima Chronicles. But yeah, the whole book is me.
One more question on this. As you go into it, knowing it's a series and maybe not the exact number of books that'll be in the series, but knowing it'll be a series, is it hard to know where to cut off story 1?
Yes, because actually the Rima Chronicles books 1 and 2 is a direct adaptation of the novel that I wrote. And I split it in half. And so I had to rearrange some events to make it feel more like a standalone journey, sort of, at least for the first book. So any questions you have after reading the first book will be answered in the second book, but then more questions will be raised. So
keep the interest going.
Yeah, there's so much story to tell. So
well, and I love it too as a bookseller at Rakestraw, because this book is, has great adventure and fantasy and emotion and, tiny light romance and boy and girl characters. I mean, all of it is, yeah, so wonderful. Can't wait for number 2.
Thank you, Susan. That's so nice.
Yes. Okay, so that is Amy with Rima Chronicles. Next, we have Christina Sorterbot. Of course, we all know her. Let's see, I don't see her on the screen, but I'm sure she's coming soon. We all know her as the, for so many great books. She has 2 Newbery honors, one for A Wish in the Dark and one for All 13. And her new picture book is coming out August 2nd, called To Change a Planet. I love all books with an environmental theme, and this one's really a great picture book for kids about the fragility of the planet, but is in a hopeful way about what we can do. So I'd love to hear more. I don't have a cover of it to show, but I'm sure Christina or the Kaliba people do. Sorry, a bug in my face. Christina.
Yes, thank you so much, Susan. I'm so excited to be talking about To Change a Planet. And this is illustrated by an amazing illustrator, Raheli Jamapour-Bell. She has many picture books. One of them is Our Favorite Day, which is one of my favorite, like, back to school picture books. And so this is a book that's all about climate change. And the aim of the book is to explain climate change for the youngest kiddos, with truth, with accuracy, but also ultimately with hope. So it's very spare. It's only 76 words. And so most of it is told through the pictures. And the inspiration for writing this book, I don't have to tell people in California how much of a crisis climate change is for us. And it came at a time when I was just very, like, depressed, really, like feeling lost. Like, this is such a big problem. And when I look at my kids, like, what kind of world are they going to be living in? And just feeling very down. And then it just suddenly, as I was thinking about it, I had this realization that, okay, climate change, it's caused by something that is so tiny, a carbon molecule, right? Too tiny to even see. But because there is so much of it, that's what's causing the issue, right? And also, actions by human beings. One human being's actions wouldn't matter, but because so many of us are contributing to the issue, that's what causes the problem. And that is also the solution. That, I wrote this at a time when I was feeling so small and so powerless. And then to realize that but when we all come together, that's when we have the power. And I also wrote it after my experience researching the Thai cave rescue. And that was this moment where people had come together and done this thing that was no one thought possible. No one had ever done anything like that before. So just really, I felt after researching that, like, if humans want to do anything, there's really nothing we cannot do. We just have to decide it's important. So the illustrations in the book are amazing. They're so colorful, so bright. So, like, here's one of the spreads. And Raheli just does this fantastic job of showing, like, one little person, one little child, and how, they are so small, but so powerful when we come together. And really, there we go. It's the young people who are leading the way on this. So the text is bare, because I know that parents and teachers, they really want to talk about this, but a lot of them don't know how how do you explain this for little ones without it being too scary and with leaving them feeling hopeful. So that's the plan, is for, families and classrooms to read it together. But then the back matter in the back, there's a lot here that's like, what is climate change? What's causing climate change? How do we know all this? And all of this comes straight from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, like straight from that source, which is our best resource for climate change science. So it's both, that kids deserve the best, and that's the best information. So that's why it's in there. So I'm really, really excited about this book.
I like the way you put it. Kids deserve the best. As a bookseller, and so, parents and grandparents coming back to the kids section and wanting to buy a great gift, sometimes they shy away from the environmental themed books because they're like, oh, I don't want to scare my kid. I don't want to depress them. I don't want to think the world's going to fall apart. But I love how you put it in a way that a kid, yes, there's a very real problem, but they can play a positive role. So I really liked how you did that in so few words. I hadn't thought about how few words that is, but the combination of the words and the great illustrations really convey that well. So I love it.
Good.
Love
I'm
it,
so
love it. Can't
glad.
wait to get that in the hands of kids, and all that great back matter in the back will be great for educators and parents alike, honestly. So
Yeah, one thing I learned in my research for this book is that there is research showing that kids can affect their whole family's impact on the environment. That when kids come home and they start talking about things and they've learned about something's important to them, it changes the way their parents and their families and their neighborhoods behave. So, kids can't vote yet, but they have so much power.
oh,
So, yeah.
totally agree. I was out to dinner with a group of moms from my kids' school a couple of years ago, and someone asked if we wanted to-go containers, and this one mom says, "I can't bring that home. My kid won't let us bring use plastic containers. I can't bring that home." Anyway, I thought that was hysterical. Yes, but true. Very powerful. Kid's voice. So thank you. Beautiful. And I just have to comment the tie-in with all 13. I read it, when it came out, and the amazing ability of people to solve problems that they didn't even know they would ever play a role in, right?
Yeah.
So same thing. Yep. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. August 2nd, that wonderful book comes out. And on August 2nd, another fabulous book comes out. Our next author, Natalie Lloyd, her book, Hummingbird. Natalie, I love all of your books, and this is my favorite. This is, I absolutely love Hummingbird. Of course, I'm going to let you talk about it. I just won't blab on about it, but it's a middle grade book featuring this character that I will never forget, Olive. She's such an endearing, peppy, just memorable, wonderful, positive character. And I'll let you tell what her special situation is, but I love the mix of her actual family dynamics, her personal health situation, and a little bit of magic thrown in. So have at it, Natalie, for Hummingbird, also coming out August 2nd.
Thank you so much for that, Susan. Now I don't even know how to start. I don't even know what to say.
Sorry.
That's good. It's a good problem to have. So Hummingbird comes out soon, and this is the most personal novel I've ever written. I'm so excited to share it. And on the surface, it's about an 11-year-old girl named Olive who has grown up in this tiny town. She's the only kid homeschooled in this tiny town, and she is dying to go to middle school and meet her forever BFF. But she gets to middle school, and it's not what she expects. It kind of stinks, like it does for many of us. And all hope is not lost because she hears a legend about a creature in the woods who grants wishes to people brave enough to find it. And so she sets out to do that, and of course unleashes all this magic along the way. But when I first saw Olive in my imagination, I didn't know if I could write it because Olive kind of looked like me. She has the same physical disability I do, and I'll try to make that short. I was born on the most important holiday of all, Groundhog Day. And I was born with a broken collarbone, which wasn't a big deal. But 10 weeks later, my mom heard a snap when I was just laying in my crib, and then I started screaming. And long story short, I was diagnosed with a brittle bone disease called osteogenesis imperfecta. So I broke lots of bones in elementary and middle school, usually my legs. I used a wheelchair and walker all through that time. And the word I heard used to describe me more than any other word was fragile. And I just didn't want Olive to have to deal with that. So at first I thought, okay, Olive will have the same disability I do, but it's going to be like an afterthought. She's going to have a big adventure. She's going to have this awesome friendship and on and on. But something was missing in her story. It's like I couldn't find the heart of it. And I realized why in 2019. I was walking through my kitchen one night to see if we'd locked a door, and I slipped and fell, and I heard a snap. I broke my femur for the first time in many years. And I was so sad. And the weeks after that, I was very depressed. And I remember sitting on the couch one night with my husband, who is the sweetest thing. I always describe him like Gilbert Blythe if Gilbert had sleeve tattoos and cussed a little. He's pretty great. But I was sitting beside him and I was like, I just feel broken. I feel fragile everywhere. And he said, your bones are fragile. You're not fragile. And I think that's when I realized what I was missing in the story and what I needed to get through that season. And if any of y'all live with chronic illness or disability, you know, it's never an afterthought. There are days that it defines everything you do, but it's one part of a really big life. And so that's what it became for Olive. She actually sets out to wish that away. And she realizes so much about herself and her life and her relationships in the process. And I'm very excited I get to share it with people.
Wonderful. I love that. That's exactly it. It is a part of her. It's an important part of her, but it doesn't define her. It's not all of her. No pun intended there. And her parents, of course, her mom is so worried. Of course you would be. And I'm sure your parents were too, but it's her incredible exuberant personality comes through. I love that. It's a lesson to teach all of us. So love it, love it. A question for you. Have you sent a copy to Dolly Parton?
No, I wish I could. I mean, she is, as you know, she is one of my idols. Like, if my life were a fairy tale, she would be my fairy godmother.
Well, she might be. I mean, maybe just ask her. She seems
maybe, great. Right? So fingers crossed. Maybe I can get it to her someday.
I just think, yeah, you need to say, I'm sure Scholastic can help you do that, to get a copy to Dolly Parton, because it is, I mean, it's the references to her in this are so great. So yeah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you, thank you. Next, we have up Ryan LaSala for the incredibly wonderful YA horror book set at a secluded summer camp called The Honeys. The Honeys comes out August 16th. I don't read a lot of horror, I will tell you, and I was a teeny bit nervous to dip into it. It is so immersive and wonderful, and wow. I heard a bee the other day when I was sitting on my patio, and I got a little PTSD from the whole thing, I'll be honest, because it's so, yeah, Ryan, wow, what a world. So, you know, I can't wait to share this with the YA customers that come in our store. I love the mix of, well, I don't want to get too down into it, but the horror is real, but the natural world around it, and then the people who they look like and who they really are. Excellent. So wonderful. Tell us more, Ryan.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, so I've got a copy here myself, but you know, if that's not big enough, don't worry. I also brought home my giant poster-sized version of this, which I'm actually the size of a bee. So this proves it. This is actually the size of the book. But yeah, thank you. So The Honeys is sort of the next stop on my lifelong mission as an author to create a new mythology around queerness that sort of moves past shame, which is a lot of what books about queerness tend to focus on, and moves into kind of everything else that went into my experience growing up as a queer kid. And it's about Mars, who's this gender fluid character that witnesses the really horrific death of their sister, and it propels them towards this really beautiful scenic summer camp that him and his sister used to attend together, that he thinks is involved with sort of the death of his sister, and specifically these girls at the summer camp that are called the Honeys, because they're gorgeous and sweet and kind and smart and strategic, and they sort of guard these secrets at this camp. And they're named the Honeys because of the beehives that they maintain behind their secluded meadow cabin. And Mars is convinced that all of these things are connected, because that's what grief does. After you lose somebody, the normal things about our life kind of become horrific, and they connect in really strange calculus. And so Mars, who's like a STEM kid, he's not like an outdoorsy child, right? Like, he goes to camp as a means of revenge, really, starts to kind of put these things together, and he links the Honeys with his sister's death, with the people that are going missing around the summer camp around, the time of the honey harvest, with the strange honey that these bees seem to produce. And, like all horror stories, discovering the truth often is, the thing that makes us cringe. And so it's a deeply personal story to me. It was a ton of fun to write. I did a ton of research about it, and it is, just like the introduction, it's based in the natural world. I've discovered, growing up as a kid in the woods, that there's all of these like minified operas and horrors that are taking place all around us at all times. Nature is a magnificent but sort of subliminal thing in its contrast of magnificence and horror, and bees, I think, kind of exemplify that. A few bee facts for you. So when you have a teaspoon of honey, that's the life's work of 12 bees. And when you have a jar of honey, that jar of honey represents the cumulative work of bees traveling to 8 million flowers on a flight path that, if you added up all of the bees flying all at once, that path could circle the world 1.5 times. So when you're ingesting honey, when you put that in your tea, you're tasting the like accumulated essence of an entire ecosystem. Also, bees, the queen bee, she actually doesn't have any authority in a beehive. The queen bee is just sort of named for her priority, but it's really the hive itself that makes these decisions. One bee can't exist alone, but a bee has to sort of exist as part of a colony. They're a superorganism. And that felt just so ripe in terms of an analogy for loneliness. As a queer kid, I was often lonely. I was between the binary of boy and girl at places like summer camp. And I sort of had to figure out everything for myself. And that's what I gave to Mars. Same thing with, the loneliness of grief. I also lost my sister. And so I wanted to give Mars this journey that sets him on a crash course towards these girls that represent everything that's the antithesis of what he has to deal with. Loneliness, grief, being disconnected from the world, being disconnected from nature. Mars has to kind of deal with each of these things in turn in order to get to the truth. And it's a really cathartic and fundamentally like calibrating journey for them, but ultimately one that I think, also has a lot of joy. So it is horror, but there's a ton of emotion and a ton of facts underpinning it. So I can't wait for people to read it.
The bee facts are interesting. I love how you wove them in, not all of those, but lots of those into the story too. And I learned a lot about bees. And the thing about the queen bee not really being in charge, I mean, I didn't even know that. And then the whole theme of Mars fitting in, and you're talking about your life fitting in, and then the bees, working together and fitting in, the concept of fitting in. And it really relates to Natalie Lloyd's book, Hummingbird too. So much about fitting in and feeling that tension with other people in these group settings. I also liked the, on one page near the end where you talk about the culture of toxic silence. I thought that was really, that part was really powerful and wonderful. So there's so many great themes in this book that are accessible and but meanwhile kept it fun. And I mean, Mars' personality was so great to go on the ride with. So thank you. What a wonderful book. I am talking about the tie-in with nature. All 4 of your books, this is really for all of you or any of you who want to jump in, all 4 of your books really are about nature, and or nature plays a very big role in them, I should say it that way. And in some cases, the tying in with the supernatural world. But, Ryan, yours is, you talked about Mars not being a nature kid or an outdoorsy kid, growing up. I'd love to hear from some of you or all of you about what was your experience with nature as a kid, because nature is such a strong theme in all 4 of these books. So any of you go for it.
I guess I could say a thing about that. So my grandfather actually owned an island on the St. Lawrence River in the Thousand Islands between the border of Canada and New York State. So we'd go there every summer. So I have a lot of special memories there of just getting up at the crack of dawn, going down to the dock and watching the herons, because the more still you are, the more animals come out, right? So I would just be there like as a 10-year-old watching the herons eat the carp and the fish just sleeping at my feet and all this stuff. And it felt like I had a voice, imaginative kid, right? So I think that really informed the formation of the gods and stuff. I would personify nature a lot on my own. And I kind of miss it. I should go hiking again and get reconnected with those voices. Yeah. What about you guys? Do you guys have some nature moments?
I also also grew up going to spend time with my grandparents. That's probably my biggest immersion into nature when I was a kid. Every summer, I would go to this teeny tiny town in East Texas called Elysian Fields, and it didn't even have like a single stoplight. It was so small, and my grandparents had their house there, and they had this huge garden, but it's very, very rural. And my granddad was a fisherman. So we would go, like worms on the hook type of fishing where you just sit there, and he was a hunter too. And I think there's like a stereotype of what an environmentalist is. So, most of the people in that town were very conservative, this is a country place, and they were very fierce protectors of the natural world. They took care of it. The things that they liked to do were outside. And so I learned that lesson there for sure.
I think for me, kind of similar to what you all said, I grew up in East Tennessee, obviously, you can tell by my accent, but my mom had a huge garden, and we had a compost pile, which I did not think was cool when I was a kid. I didn't understand why we had to use a compost pile, but I remember even, at times when I had a cast or I wasn't walking well, I would get in a wagon and she would pull me into the garden. And I remember, running my fingers through dirt. I remember holding up earthworms. It just felt like there was constantly something magical to discover, or that excitement I felt when flowers bloom, because she was so excited. I joke that even now, if she and I go look at flowers somewhere, she just starts shouting out the names and it sounds like magic spells to me. She just loves the earth and she loves nature. And I think, too, in any kind of Appalachian storytelling or Southern storytelling, nature has so much folklore attached to it. It's almost like another character in a story. So that's always fun to play with when I'm writing as well.
Totally agree with all that.
Ryan, were you outdoorsy? Were you more Mars?
I actually was pretty outdoorsy, and like Mars, I went to a lot of summer camps, and I consistently had the experience of like counselors, like grown adults in my life at the end of, these like sessions at summer camp be like, I really had my doubts about you, but you really proved me wrong, which was always like meant as a compliment. But what they were basically saying is like, I saw those limp wrists when you showed up and I never thought you'd make it here. But I'm like a much more like scrappy, tough person, especially as a kid. I was like very rough and tumble, got into fights all the time and stuff. And so Mars actually had like a lot of the stuff that happens in the Honeys, in the way that Mars consistently sort of takes people's expectations and proves them wrong, and then comments on the way that people sort of congratulate themselves for being proven wrong, in the way that my counselors congratulated themselves for being proven wrong. All of that's like true to form in terms of like my own history with like going to summer camps and basically being out in the woods and having, to survive.
Well, the parts where Mars gets into these, athletic competitions there are
Yeah.
just, oh, you're rooting for him. Oh, those people around him. Kaliba, people, you'll cut me off. Are we wrapping up?
Yep, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up. You guys are.
One last quick comment, which is Ryan and Natalie, when you have a chance to read one another's books, I just want to know what will happen when the Honeys meet the Madelines. Sorry.
I can't. Well, I'll think about it.
I can't wait. Anyway, sorry.
Oh no, I'm glad. That's a good one. We all need you to weigh in on that and tell us what happens. I want to hear.
Will do.
Well, thank you all. Thank you so much to our panelists. You guys are all fantastic, and we are so looking forward to these books. I know there are a lot of children's specialists on this call, and so they will be looking for those as well. Also, thank you to Susan Reckers from Rakestraw Books. Susan, you're the best, and we love you. Thank you so much.